Good morning, Metalheads Unit. Welcome to a new episode of the Metal Meltdown, and today we're looking at the latest studio album from Igorrr, entitled Spirituality and Distortion. This is the fourth studio album from extreme and avant-garde metal band Igorrr, a project headed up by French songwriter, DJ, and multi-instrumentalist Gautier Serre. And that right there, ladies and gentlemen, is where my knowledge of Igorrr pretty much comes to an end. I had never really heard of these guys before. I'd never really heard any of their other records. I've never heard any projects that Gautier had been a part of in the past. As a result, I went into this record pretty blind, but in all honesty, I don't know if I would have done it any other way if I had the option, because going into it blind made this record all the more jarring, made it all the more shocking, all the more intriguing, all the more exciting, and all the more fascinating as I began to dig beneath the layers and really dissect everything going on. I mean, even by the very loose standards of experimental and avant-garde music, this is some pretty batshit insane material. I was completely hypnotized and fascinated by all of these concepts and sonic fusions that I had never really heard before, or at the very least not executed in exactly this same way. To put it very, very simply, this is a weird fucking record, and it may stand as the weirdest record I've heard so far in 2020. Igorr's particular blend of experimental and extreme flavors and spices can somewhat be boiled down to a fusion of the creativity and flexibility of a band like Diablo Swing Orchestra with the chaos, manicy, and savage energy of a band like the Dillinger Escape Plan. One minute you might hear these neck-snapping industrial guitars, the next you might hear a very classical kind of rhythm on par with that of a traditional waltz. One minute you're delivered a vocal assault that sounds like the combined forces of hell itself. The next it feels like you're at the weirdest fucking rave imaginable, with all of these spastic bass drops, electronic cymbals, glitchy noises that often pop in and out of the soundscape, jarring you, shocking you intentionally most of the time. There are a lot of weird noises across the entire album, many of which don't really sound like something a traditional instrument could produce. And even a traditional instrument like, say, the common electric guitar is twisted and turned inside out in ways that I don't think few have ever really realized outside of literal guitar virtuosos. The music is so insistently insane, psychotic, colorful, violent, and this transitions to the emotional core of this record as well, the concept, the presentation, the general aesthetic, as the 14 tracks on this album are painted almost to represent his mental and emotional states of mind. To paraphrase Gautier himself from a press release that I received with my promo copy of this album, these 14 tracks are meant to represent states of Gautier's own mind, his mental health, his emotional health, his boredom, his desire to be creative and ambitious and just plain flat out weird. Even going on to imply in this press release that he lacked confidence in the concepts of this record and that he wasn't really sure where it was going or what it would lead to. Which is fascinating to me because nothing on this record sounds like the works of a particularly unconfident fellow. Now, with all this in mind, I should make it clear now that the first time I listened to this album, I mostly just thought it was being weird for the sake of being weird. And it wasn't until my second listen where I really started to sink my teeth into this and I started to understand where Gautier was coming from mentally and emotionally that I was able to connect with all of the abstract ideas and musical palettes on this record. Ultimately, this record demands a lot more time and patience than what would normally be dedicated to a lone metal record. For this reason, I will just go ahead and say, if nothing I've said is appealing to you so far, just turn off this video, go listen to something else, no judgment, I promise, you do you, but at this point you're wasting your time. From start to finish, I am equally puzzled and fascinated by all of the musical ideas existing within this album. From the mentally unstable industrial death metal of a track like Par Pairing, to the nonsensical and high-energy accordion and guitar trade-offs of Musette Maximum, to the elegant and nervous waltz of the very appropriately titled track Nervous Waltz, which is also, I think, where we see the most obvious comparisons between Igorrr and the aforementioned Diablo Swing Orchestra. The difference here being is that this type of musical fusion would be used by Diablo Swing Orchestra to create something very epic, very lavish, even quite catchy, whereas Igorrr uses it to show off what I could only really describe as an old-timey schizophrenic episode. At no point on this album does Igorrr exercise any emotional or musical restraint, even in moments where it would be to his benefit to do so, like on opening track Downgrade Desert, opening the album on an ominous and punishing note with its Godflesh-inspired industrial drawl spiced with flourishes of traditional Balkan and Middle Eastern melodies and instruments. And this is all just the tip of the iceberg, may I add. We have yet to address the true lunacy of tracks like Very Noise, Himalaya Massive Ritual, Kung Fu Chevre. Now, as I said before, I think this album will work best for a lot of people if you go in completely alien, if you go in quite literally as an Igorrr virgin. So for these reasons, I'm actually going to stop really talking about the music of this record, and I'm going to let you discover this thing for yourself. I'm going to let you dissect it, analyze it, and critique it how you choose. That and the fact that, frankly, this video is going on for a little bit too long. There's just so much going on in this album that I just don't have the time to really dig into it all. How ironic that I would ask you to dedicate more time and patience than usual to this when I can't do the same for this album, but what are you gonna do? I got a schedule. I have other shit I need to do, alright? Forgive me for being a fucking adult. I'm gonna give this album a very enthusiastic 3.5 out of 5. I will admit that it does occasionally get by on being so bizarre, so unpredictable, so utterly, inarguably weird. And I will concede that as consistently fascinating and exciting as this album was, it was also left occasionally quite awkward due to the drastic musical changes brought in by the inherently schizophrenic nature of this record. And that's where you really need to exercise that time and patience, particularly if, like myself, you're coming into this completely alien and unaware of Igorr's musical palette. And I'm willing to bet a good chunk of money that even if you come out of this album saying, I just don't like it, you won't be able to argue that it sounds like anything else out there. You won't be able to argue that it is a totally unique, one-of-a-kind experience put to tape. Fans of weird, crazy, progressive, unconventional music are going to have a fucking ball with this thing. I could even picture this being an early contender for Album of the Year for those of you deep within the worlds of these aforementioned genres. For myself, I could never go that far, but I would happily call this the weirdest album I've heard so far in 2020, and it has made me very excited to finally check out more of Igorr's previous records. 3.5 out of 5. I think it's safe to say it's a cautious but still enthusiastic 3.5 out of 5. Exercise some patience and you will be rewarded with something unlike anything else out there right now. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I'm not an expert, nor do I claim to be, so what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? Thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately, and you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.